Well, it's the aftermath. Do you know the meme that we see? That's how it started and then how it's going. This is going to be a look at the short interim that we've had the biggest trade in PWHL history between Ottawa and Toronto. And we're going to be joined here in a minute by our good friend Chris Sinclair to discuss the aftermath. So since the trade, we know that Ottawa has taken off and are on a 3-game winning streak after a couple of losses and have been out of Ottawa on a road trip for most of the month of January so far. But thanks to Emerance Maschmeyer, they've looked really good and pulled out 3 wins. So the feeling there is just all positive. And it looks like both players are fitting in really well. Bach playing with Serdachny has looked like her offensive self. So it's really worked out there. For Toronto, unfortunately, they lost that head-to-head on New Year's Eve, which might skew the way that it looks right now. They probably deserve to win that, but Maschmeyer stood on her head. And with Harman paired up with Renata Fast, I think the results will be really good. And we do know that Hayley Skimura is the type of power forward that fits in well with the lineup. So, they have Daryl Watts on board, another former Ottawa player. And Skimura can play in that middle six, as we say, and probably contribute. She has been playing with Blair Turnbull and Emma Malte so far. So let's bring in Chris and, get the thoughts from the Ottawa side of things. So now we welcome in our friend Chris Sinclair. He's a contributor for the Hockey News Women's and also the host of the podcast, The Rinkside Rundown, which is part of the Women's Sports Podcast Network. So be sure to check that out, and I will put the links to those. We welcome you back, Chris. We haven't talked to you since last season, and there's just a little bit for Ottawa and Toronto fans especially to talk about right now.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, there's a little bit to talk about, and it's really exciting for both teams. So I'm excited to be back and to chat about it.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to kind of talk about, we don't know the results of the trade or anything like that, but we've had a couple of games on both sides since the shock waves of the Larocque and Bach for Harman and Skimura trade between Ottawa and Toronto. So from the Ottawa side of things, what was your reaction and what's your reaction now seeing a couple games?
Yeah, I think truthfully, I share the same sentiment that a lot of Ottawa fans had, which was shock. When Harman's been playing this season and a lot of last season, at least in the top 2 pairings this season in the top pairing, along with Rose, and was relied upon. Both of them were relied upon, of course, both of them inaugural players for the team. But Harman has been relied upon this season to be that top pairing with Rose and has really allowed Rose to flourish offensively. And then Skimura, she's someone who she can play up and down the lineup. She can play top line minutes. She can play, middle six is probably where I think she's most effective. But she's gritty. She's unafraid to drive the net. And that's something that secondary scoring has been an opportunity for Ottawa last season as well as this season. And so to see the two of them go, they were fan favorites. It's tough. It was really tough. And especially too, when you see, and we'll get into it, I'm sure, but when you saw the return, right? You saw an aging defender in Larocque. And then you saw Bach, who, most recently with Toronto was playing on their bottom line, right? So you see these players that, a defender on the back nine of her career, and you see a player who in Bach who isn't getting a ton of minutes, and you give up what they gave up. It's shocking at first, but we'll get into it. But it's that's kind of where everyone was at the beginning. But I think they're pretty happy with what they've seen thus far.
Yeah, very interesting that, I think from most people's just sort of top level down reaction was like quality for quality. It looked like Toronto got the better pair, but pretty quickly we all kind of looked at the intangibles and things like that Larocque brings. And I think that was the shocker for the Sceptres side was, letting someone like Larocque leave your dressing room and her leadership and the pairing with Renata Fast. So, surface level, it might have looked one way, but maybe, Mike Hirschfeld, just a quiet genius. He's made some spectacular deals, I think, or, quietly on the surface, maybe didn't look right. And then the players have fit in really well. So I'll just read off last year. Savannah Harmon had 3 goals, 9 assists for 12 points. So a really good offensive defender. Haley Skamura had 5 and 5 for 10 points. And in contrast, Victoria Bach, as you said, who was kind of playing in the bottom, and she didn't play the full season last year because of finishing up her teacher's college. So in 16 games, she had 5 points, 2 and 3. And The Rock actually had 1 goal, 9 assists for 10 points. So a little bit of offensive contribution there. And then I think what stands out for me is Harmon and Skamura both have 0 points this year in their games with Ottawa, and then in both the games they've played with Toronto. So we know Bach had a really nice assist with Ottawa. She had a goal here in Toronto. So, and then Ottawa is on a winning streak. So has anything changed just quickly in those first couple games?
Yeah, I think, and what I want to say as well, just to kind of add on to that, is that Bach is a player who, like you said, she didn't have too many points last season, but at every level that she's played in, she's been an offensive threat every shift. And so I get it that from outside in, it kind of looks like we're not really getting a great offensive threat there. But you saw in this, especially in the second game, but
Yep.
these two first games slotted alongside Serdachny or on her line, anyways. They've found instant chemistry, and we saw that on that beautiful assist. Drew the goaltender to the one side, left Serdachny wide open. Um, just a really, really, really great player. I think it was a bold move. Like you said,
Yeah.
Hirschfield's not afraid to make those moves. He made them last season.
Yep.
Fans didn't like them, but they worked out, right? Dark Angelo from
Yeah.
last season didn't put up any points. Already has, I think it's 3 goals now on the season.
Yeah.
And no one liked that trade for losing a
Yep.
Gia, but he's unafraid to make those bold moves to make the team better, and he's made the team better. They're
Hmm.
on a 3-game winning streak, all on the road, coming back home for the first time in a month. Like there's a lot of buzz here around this
Yeah.
team.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. It's me interrupting, probably me. Just to say, we are brought to you by you. This is a 100% listener supported podcast. And that means that we rely on you and your contributions, and it is so appreciated. There are a few ways you can do that. It's either with a super thanks on YouTube or just directly going to our PayPal link, which is gamedayhockey1@gmail.com. And you can just directly send us a few dollars if you're enjoying the podcast and the content that we're giving you here. It means the world to us, and we're not going to interrupt you with any ads, just ourselves, and we're all in this together. It really keeps us going, so thanks for your support. I felt like part of the reason they were okay to part with Savannah Harmon was a lot more offense coming from Jincy Rose, and then Savalainen kind of, she got her first goal, but she was already looking like she had that offensive push, so they might have, as you said, balanced it out like, okay, we're getting a little more there. Maybe we kind of flip it upside down and sacrifice an offensive defender for just solid as a rock.
I do just want to touch on the fact that a player like Markowski is another big defender who puts up a lot of points.
Okay.
So again, it just kind of reemphasizes the point that, yes, Harmon was an important member of this team for sure. But when she was a smaller defender who put up points, when you could then, look at a player like you mentioned, Sevalainen's looked great. Markowski stepped in. She played top pair with Bell in the last game and didn't look out of place at all. So, I think that's kind of where they're looking at, again, a lot of the same.
And then we're going to have the rematch. I mean, this is pretty quickly 3 games already between these two teams. On the 14th, we've got Toronto visiting. So just to kind of wrap things up, I wanted to ask about Savannah Harmon because, as you know, a little bit farther away from this side of things, I just think of her as super talented, offensive. We do remember that she was paired up with Renata Fast at Clarkson. She had the hat trick, I believe, in that All-Star showcase. So, put on a good show there. But has anything changed in what you saw from her this season for her to be off to maybe a slow start, that they were okay to part with her?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because, again, when you see an offensive-minded defender not scoring, you wonder if there's an issue there. But from my perspective, this is what it comes down to. She's been paired with Jincy Rose. And Jincy Rose has always been really good offensively, but when she's paired with someone who is very defensive minded as well, and really good on both sides of the puck in that regard, in Harman, that allowed Jincy Rose to really become more
Yeah.
offensively minded. So what that meant is that now that Rose is activating in the offensive zone, leading those charges into the offensive zone, it puts Harman now in a position where she has to play and be relied upon to be more defensive. So that's why I think you're not seeing the numbers necessarily that you saw in previous years, is because now Harman is having to play more defense because Rose is playing more
Right.
offense.
Okay.
And that's why I think everyone's like, oh, Rose is off to such a great start offensively, and she is, but no one's talking about the fact that she got there because Harman is now having to, not to say that she's picking up on the defensive lapses and things like that, but any defensive mistake that Rose is making because she's thinking offense, now Harman's picking up on that. So
Right.
that's why I think, it's really exciting to have for Toronto to have a player like Harman who can, is really great offensively, but she can quickly just turn that or flip that
Hmm.
switch
Hmm.
and become defensive. Whatever you need from her, she's flexible enough to be able to play both or do both roles really, really effectively.
Nice. Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, I like the idea of that pairing. Renata Fast is off to a great start with 8 points already, and it helps tremendously to know that they have that familiarity. And then LaRock was paired with Rose. I think if when Rose comes back, and that'll be just as you said, kind of free up Jincy Rose to skate forward. The story that has been Emerance Maschmeyer, and you can say, well, Toronto's on a losing streak, Ottawa's on a win streak, but you can maybe put parentheses around that 2-1 victory for Ottawa. That was just maybe not the result that, the eye test would tell you, but good on them. I mean, so great to see Maschmeyer doing this. I think she's not carrying the team on her back, but she's the first star right now, just on this charge forward, as we say.
Yeah, I would say great observation on the win over Toronto, because when I watched that game, Ottawa had no right winning that
They
game
had no
at
bit.
all.
Yeah, it
No,
was.
not at all. But I would
That's
say that's
hockey. That's
yeah,
hockey.
exactly. I would say that's Maschmeyer definitely has carried the team through that victory for sure.
Yeah.
I would say it's obvious, and you saw it back in the rivalry series as well. Maschmeyer spent the offseason working with Pierre Gru, who's the goaltender coach for the Ottawa Charge, and it shows that she put in a ton of time with him, because you're just seeing she's way more aggressive than
Hmm.
she used to be, and she's way more positionally sound. So she isn't necessarily having to make those frantic saves
Hmm.
that she's had to maybe at times last season or prior, because she knows where to be and when to be there. And I mean, she's third in the league in goals against with two. It's a flat two, and technically in that department, she's actually tied with Julie in Montreal for goals against. And she's right behind the leader at Maddie Rooney at 1.98, right? So
I will see you in Ottawa for the rematch. So we'll hope the Sceptres can kind of pull up their socks a little bit and start to challenge some of the teams ahead of them now. But it's early. It's
yeah.
still early in the season. So thanks for joining us, Chris. It's been really great. And as we said, be sure to check out Chris's Rinkside Rundown podcast and his writing for the Hockey News and the Women's Sports Podcast Network. You can find his podcast there and some others. So, it's just great to check in with somebody who's got boots on the ground to tell us the Ottawa point of view. So we'll see you in a few days, and hope both teams keep playing strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It's always great to chat.
All right. Thanks a lot.